Somebody's out there, someone to call my mind. Feels like I'm falling, feels like I'm out of time. Trapped in a prison, a fortress of solitude. And all my decisions, they led me so far from you. No one knows but me, the pain I put you through. No one knows but me, the reasons why I do the things I do. I tried so hard to tell the truth. I made you smile, I made you cry, but more than often told you that I'm delusional. So delusional, I'm delusional. So delusional, I'm delusional. So delusional, I'm delusional. So delusional, yeah. All day waiting for you, wondering if you took the phone. I've been alone all day thinking of you, hoping that you take a call. It's been a lonely night, wasting my time, praying to a memory. I've been alone all day, thinking of you and me, You told me there would never be another, that you could never play pretend, and I would be your only lover, closer than your best of friends. And we can build a life together, and we can build a house of cards. But when the storm crashed in on us, no, I wasn't that surprised. Do you know the reasons? The reasons
Good morning. Get rid of that. Alright, so I was poking around some Tiltify stuff, and I ran across, I don't actually have it up anymore, a thing in their support. Well, actually, I was looking at the event page, and it's like, oh, they redid it, and the API key field is missing in the new page. So I started poking around the support docs, and it's like, oh, look, there's a API depreciation notice that was like a month ago for actual removal. And like, because the old API was like so seamless, like just here's the API key, here's the docs. They had no way to contact me. So there's a V3 API, which doesn't look too different from the V2. One difference is that you have your account registers applications with keys instead of just every campaign having a key for that campaign. So what I'm hoping is that I can use last year's event to get test data. So we actually have something to look at. Another thing that they had in the past was the API test endpoint, which I've not seen any signs of here. This documentation looks like it was maybe reluctantly done by a programmer because somebody said make it documentation. It's like a lot of the stuff is there. You kind of have to poke around for it a little bit. And, we've got very basic. Here's an example. Also, this documentation link is broken. Little things like that. This is development for the documentation site, I think. So I set up some apps, which I haven't had on this screen just because eventually I'm going to have to stick some API keys in there. So I'm thinking of looking at the server first, because once we've got this to work, it might be interesting to look at the OAuth flow, because that way I wouldn't have to be giving out my sort of application keys to anybody else who was using the front-end apps. Although, that's actually, now that I think about it, that's only... The typical use case is going to be they go to my server. And then that will have the token URL. So that might actually take care of that. Yeah, they're just like, hey, you know what OAuth is, right? Here's our URLs. Do you document those by any chance? Well, there's permissions. Ah. They only document get. Yeah, so this isn't different, is it? Oh, well, this does break down some of the fields a little bit. I don't see permissions, the thing in here. Yeah, so our main point of interest is going to be donations. That's really the thing we care about. So I have to... I guess there's no point in keeping around API V2 stuff, because it's theoretically completely shut down. I guess I should fire it up and try to hit something just to reassure myself that it's actually just gone. So this was a... Yes, you were your own node server. Well, there were a couple of... Why do we have a package here? This apparently used dist instead of public. Okay. No, and there's also public. I'll have to remember why I was using those. Then source is the Elm stuff for the front end. Static server I might actually need during development. I need to remember that. So donation config. Oh, there were changes from publishing stuff. I had some proc files for this to use with Foreman, but I had ended up starting a bunch of stuff specifically. So procfile is what we use when hosting on Heroku. Procfile.dev has a bunch of dev servers, and then some of them require different calls on Windows. Right. Because supervisor was not playing nicely on Windows. Okay. So this is actually the polar. And what I need to check real quick is what my env is set up for. Edit.env. Feed Tiltify local API key. Well, we need to get stuff up and started first, so that's fine for initial testing. Just getting our environment back. File.dev. We need a DB. Start DB. Let's see, that's Elm, that's Elm, that's Elm, and actually I've compressed, well, several of these into one, so I don't actually need those. Static servers, the web front end, which we're not as concerned with right now. Info servers for getting the information out, so we're mainly concerned with the polar. Foreman start. And actually, don't I have... Yeah, I had some one-off things for doing scheduled tasks and things. Okay. So I guess we have to add a once in here. Procfile.win. Okay, so we're currently on local. We got a bunch of stuff. Great. So go edit.env. Say feed is Tiltify Live, I think. And that should give us errors. Request failed. I think 403 is gone. Well, I actually wanted to terminate anyway, so. Request failed, status code 403. Yep, so there is really no point in keeping around the old Tiltify Live. So API test doesn't exist. Let me take a look at the directory structure here. So this is info server, donation data. At best, it would be useful as reference. API tests. Okay, that was like a test of a test. Now this is Tiltify. This is like not a thing we can really do anymore. What I can do is they give us an example document. Well, it's got 2 donations. That's enough to do some parsing with. It's got an ID, it's got a name, it's got a comment, it's got an amount. That's pretty much what we need. Preview self. Okay, so API test, I don't think it really exists anymore. Live will pretty much get rewritten. Local. Okay, the problem here is that having previous year, previous year data is mostly handy for, well, it's handy for testing the API itself, for the parsing itself. But it is generally useful for testing the downstream client apps and things. But probably name, amount. Yeah, this is actually much less rich. And there's been syntax changes and some, well, fields I don't care about as much. Created at has gone, well, I mean, I don't mind that as much. Timestamps are okay. But I will not be able to use that if we remove the code entirely. So we've got parse, we've got local, loads that, live, loads stuff, and calls this. So we probably want to actually make a, well, live is invalid, but I want it for reference for a little bit. So realistically, this is a different source. We can't reuse parser. I don't remember if we use this multiple times, or if I just need one sample to work with. Anyway. Alright, so we need to do a little bit of work here. So this will be useful for the local feed. Tiltify V2. V2 cannot do a live feed. Tiltify V3 will not have a 2017. We will get to live. We will have a local that is going to start with this. V3, edit, info server, donation data. Tiltify V3, sample.json. This is invalid JSON. We go to local. Maybe I shouldn't rename that because it's changing a bunch of paths. That actually, well, that will force me to actually fix some of these, so that's maybe not bad. Okay, API doesn't exist. Tiltify V2 only has local. V3. So Tiltify V2 local. V3 local, V3 live. V3 local, V3 live, V3 live. And then in V2 itself, this is V3. V3. Okay. V3 local. Right now it's called sample. We only have one. So this is mainly we test the parser. So we update our feed. Edit.env. Tiltify V3 local. to get away from my taskbar. Okay, there's the DB. There's this. All right, well, JSON.map. So already we've got wrong. Oh, that's history from the database. V3 pars. So already we're getting very different format of stuff here. So by the time we get this, well, I mean, this is just get JSON, so we can kind of assume that this used to be just a straight up array. And we can look at 2017. Yep, they just returned a straight up array. Tiltify V3 pars. So this should be JSON.data.map. Donation.id, donation.amount, comment, name. They do not provide images. Amount, comment, name, image, ID. Apparently I have never used timestamps from donations. New donations too. I don't know if that's new. Dot reverse. There's not. Well, no, what we can do is we can jump in here. Console.log this. Or actually I could do that at the individual donation level. What? Oh, that doesn't return a value. Okay. That one's an easy game, me. Got our raw data. All right, so the pars wasn't a big deal. Live is where it's going to get interesting. So this used to go off implicitly off of the API key. Now there's a campaign's ID, and I have a API key. So I'm going to presume tiltify.com here. I'm going to presume V3 because here we go. Tiltify API V3. Now they're saying 42 here. I'm really hoping that this is not an internal ID that I have to go figure out myself. Because everything in their UI shows it with this slug. So I'm really hoping you can use slugs there, or I'm going to have to contact support. Yeah, so like this. This is also within a user, and I don't know if that's part of the ID. Uh, campaign ID. Oh, I can't do that in insert mode. Okay, sorta. They're really suffering for useful examples here. Well, it does have ID, but this is ID 42. Okay, so that is the URL. How do I get a campaign ID? Okay, so it had already downloaded all this stuff. Oh my gosh, all the social stuff. Tiltify favicon. Oh, that was cached. Oh, yep. Well, at least I can figure it out from here. So I actually just want to check. Is there... Copy link. Donation URL also uses the slug. Yeah, there's no... Doesn't seem to be any way to get this? The only... Okay, was that... Oh, so that's actually the same as that stuff. But there's not like... It's all campaign ID, cause ID, fundraising events. Teams. Currently authenticated user. But that would only be if I'd done an OAuth loop. Just a list of users? No parameters? Right, so looks like we're gonna have to figure out IDs the hard way. They don't really offer any good way to do that. So for testing purposes, what we actually want to do is go back to campaigns. Last year's event. network. Polls, rewards, donations. This is 9238. Nine, 2, 3, 8. Donations. API key, I have to set that in my env based on my own account stuff. App ID access token. It's a very cramped interface. API key equals blah blah blah. Okay, close that. Yep, save it first. Authorization. I think it is still token. Although it is, the format is now bearer. Application access tokens. By the use token. And da 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 da. Seamers to free up memory. All right, so this 2017, that's that ID. I guess we might as well go ahead and get this while we're looking at it. 2018, we want to start with this one because we know it has data. Okay, that didn't end because it was an error. And if we're generally polling, we would want to sit there and poll again. Once is a little bit of a special case. Loaded history. We seem to have not fetched anything. So we have to get in. Did I update my target feed? V3, yeah, local to live. Yep. Status code 403. All right. Forbidden. That's going to be a pain in the butt. Do we have... Uh... So I'm just curious, since I have been sort of authenticated into this browser session. Yeah, right. Do not use system clipboard by default. Bearer access token. Access token. Alright, well, let's make a temporary app. Wow. Their example OAuth URL is HTTP localhost. But if you put that in, the dialog box disappears. All your input is lost. And it says, oops, sorry, that really had to be HTTPS. Thanks. All right. I kind of miss Postman. Does this shell even have... Yep, okay, so let me get just this recorded. Edit.env. Okay, I guess I didn't copy that. So their example, I mean, I don't know if 42 is a valid thing. So that's a pain in the butt to copy from. So let's get that over there. Oh, that's right. You're a pain in the butt. So many options. Header, pass custom headers. Authorization bearer access token. So I made another one that could just temporarily use for streaming stuff. Not found. Okay, so yeah, 42 is not valid. Okay, so that's closed. We can get this back. So easy to grab the resize handles. 9238. Wait a minute. What? All right. So we're doing something wrong with our headers. And we've already changed our env key for this. So we should be using our pseudo public one. 403. That was... Oh, the token used to be quoted. I was just kind of filling it in based on that. $404. Okay, so we messed something up here. Well, can we just grab it from... Because we know this one worked. Well, I mean, that sort of works. Okay, so since I somehow and don't campaigns those little things. Now, we've gone from getting 50 in a batch. Well, no, the 50 was my local file. Although maybe it actually did return all of them. There is no indication of parameters we can use here to extend that. We can look at, yep. That doesn't make sense. So apparently there's a count parameter. But the previous next self doesn't make sense because it's all the same URL. We would have to have some sort of offset. Oh, maybe because this is this year's. Yeah. Are those time codes or IDs? Well, that's a 3570. Let me guess, that is, yeah, that's that one. Okay, so the next and previous. Well, I mean, count 10 is the kind of stuff we're used to dealing with. We might be able to actually request for more. But normally this will be running at full speed. Or, continuously. So we really shouldn't miss anything. Now, interestingly, this is before and after donation. So if I wanted to get fancy with it, I could actually be requesting after the last donation I got. And just as long as you keep doing that, you'll have a full dump. Undocumented parameters. Count equals 10, before equals donation ID, after equals donation ID. Yeah, so documentation. I'm not even sure what a fundraising event. Well, you have schedules, so I guess schedules are events. No, teams only have campaigns. I was wondering if we could like give each player their own campaign and have the team all be on a team, but that doesn't look like it'll be easy. Okay. So that much wasn't too bad. I should probably checkpoint that and then look into if we can do anything else. Some of these are moved. And I probably should have tried to do some kind of rename on that. Get RM. Info server, donation data. Git add info server donation data Tiltify V2 V3. It might notice that some of these are renamed. Yep. And it's calling the V3 local as a rename because it's just like a one-line change. V2 old JSON. Oh, live to live as well. And then V2 local. It's interesting how it attributes some of these. All right, and the feed list. I think OAuth flows. Yeah, I need better documentation on OAuth to see if that would even be practical, because I think you might need a server to do that. Let's see. Tiltify removed API V2, added V3. And I guess I should do a quick check here. This is more of a just to make sure there are no errors. Because we did have to fix up the URL stuff. Oh, I was printing out headers. Okay, no new donations, so there are none. So that is something we need to patch up before doing this. Alright, so now what does our polar code look like? Would we be able to use the before after at all? I'm not... Yeah, yeah, I'd have to figure out some way... Right, because I've actually been, like, differencing things so far. Because no one has given me that kind of after mechanism before. To make that work, I would have to... Oh, man. So we're only set to take a URL right now. And even that is usually not passed. I think I had ideas about how to use that. I never really... About doing some of this stuff upstream and never really used it. Okay, a bunch of other stuff. That's dist. CD info server. For that matter, CD donation data. Well, no, maybe not. Okay, you don't even use URL. You take it and ignore it. Where do we call that? Feed name update. Okay. Update, update, update. Yeah, I'd have to check that against the PA mod as well. Probably more against the panel. View model update, feed update, view model update. Key binding update feed. Yeah, I feel like I've never used that mechanism. So we could probably toss it out. Although we do have to bridge all these changes over to the mod as well. Well, the mods. Well, we have donation data to simplify some of that. So, well, it does get us our update functions. Yeah, because we could potentially have all these different URLs. I never ended up using that mechanism. So I would like to free up that parameter slot for possible other uses. All right, so poll, I want to make sure integrate donations. Incoming. I mean, really, I just care about the length. Right, because we're on our current campaign. Okay, got the most recent 10. Ooh, oops. Hmm. I could have this go through the list and get well, technically the response includes next URLs itself. Hmm. I'm not sure if I want to make this thing stateful. That would be one way to do it. Auto update. Ooh. Yeah. So that means we wouldn't exit if we had an error. What does a node promise use for always? Oh, this is a library. Wait a minute. That's coming from update. So this might be a server side. No, it's new promise. Okay, I don't think there's a library for that. How about Node.js documentation? Hmm? Why do we have promises then? Well, I guess we get to try this from trial and error then. Well, or I can... Uh... Then loading, we can do new console.log, new console.dir. It doesn't like that. Uh, Fine, do it again. Promise pending. I guess it's trial and error then. Always is not a function. Uh, that's a library. Maybe they're in it. Okay, so they're going off this standard. Alright, promise. Catch, then finally. Whether fulfilled or rejected. Finally is not a function. Which version? Node 8-ish. Alright, it's under process. We had a reference to it. This is the same documentation, which has probably changed since that documentation was written. Alright, so the only thing we can do here is just do both. And have the exact same stinking function for both. In fact, then can take both. An auto update, do you... Yeah, you just call update. There's no timing issues there. Unless you're update. Then integrate, well, yeah, if that fails, we just call back later. So our question was, can we do intelligent next polls? Fetching. Do I even have this kind of thing in this driver? No, actually not. I have no paradigm. Oh, that needs to be updated too. So for my server, I was just returning everything. Which for the scalar event is okay. So either the top level system has to pass down the last known donation ID, or we have to capture the next URL. Next would be after the higher number. That would be kind of an implicit behavior. And the question is, would we ever want to actually dig through everything? Hmm. Well, if I were going for archival stuff, I could essentially hack up parameters to get multiple steps or larger counts. For our normal updates, we could parse the JSON, grab the next. That's only a partial URL. Interesting. I guess that they're using color in this view to identify strings rather than quotes. And we would have to append that to our base. Alright, I'm gonna take a short break and be back to give it a try.
Try not to die, though. You know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm happy that they
No,
changed it so that it's not.
I was up at the roof last time. I don't know what I did.
Whee! Oh god.
Be doing this, I wouldn't be with my wife because I obviously wouldn't trust her. Like fucking panic, man. It's cool. It's all cool. Oh shit! Oh no. I'll see you in a minute, dude. See you in a minute. I may need to put it up in a second or so. Oh, somebody clip it. Somebody clip it, quick.
Alright, welcome back. So, for this, we need a... Ooh, actually I gotta be careful about this one. As far as moving these back and forth. Or rather, I'm going to have to compare it to the old V2, because like some of these libraries are ended up being a little bit different. Because this is like Node stuff. So they're starting at /API. So we could look at it this way. And as that. And then we say and if json.links.next, then donations equals json.links.next. Well, and now it's just getting long. So I want to know what are we querying? Now this one is going to be an actual poll because we want to do it multiple times. Got 10. After 0. Okay, cool. So there's that from there. There is the incoming length. Which should actually remove the need to do a lot of the differencing. Now the only thing we might run into here is if for any reason we fall behind. In which case, well, if we're always taking the next one, I wonder. If I were to do my initial query as, say, count equals 50, and we can see what the initial, well, if I, well, I'm going to print the links, that's right. And it will maintain count 50. Which, with the following the before and after, is kind of fine. I might be concerned about causing them some load if we were going to ask for all 50 every time. That should help make sure we don't miss any big bursts. And from there, we'll only be asking for things after time, which will be basically nothing. And maybe for archival purposes, I can pull it up even farther. Get status, get diff. I don't actually have separate feeds for this. Use next link to avoid pulling duplicate donations, and I probably should have separately committed some of the other things. So now we've got, how do we integrate that into the PA side? Because there are differences. And I've made enough changes that it's not actually trivial to do that. Because I'm going to have to be looking at things like, what does oh, that's way simpler and virtually unusable. Or that is, direct translation is virtually unusable. Okay, or direct copying. All right, sure. Well, that's annoying. So, we've got to do, this is a repo, yes. Abort. What? All right, and V2, we said, well, API test doesn't really exist anymore. Live isn't valid anymore. We've got our sample file. And then there's some path updates that we need to do there. For V3, there is none of this. There is that. We're going to have our sample JSON. Parse will probably be able to come over undifferentiated. Let's see. Local Yeah, we have to like read file and stuff. So that's probably better handled there. All right, donation data, Tiltify. All right, local API test. We have V2. There's no live. V3, V3. This is kind of in the order I want them to appear. V3, V3, V2. So V3, 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 V3. V2, V2. All right, V2 local has to go to V2 pars. Oop, that was a file path. V2. V3 live has to go to V3 pars. I'm going to deal with the rest of that stuff in a little bit. V3 local has to go to V3 pars and get Smimple. All right, so V3 local should be fine. And then V3 live is where we're going to have all the pain. Duh. So we got all that. We're going to want this for testing purposes. We have kind of been going through and removing URL parameters. Well, I guess I don't need to do that anymore. You don't take it. You don't take it. Okay. Tiltify V3 live. Authorization. This was okay up to here. Except that doesn't work. Bearer space. We do not need the quote. And process.pars. All right. That gets a little bit more complicated. Oh, and you got the JSON, so actually... Then function JSON. Set that to there. And return that. Okay. Oh, front page advertising. No, nice. Community mods. That should actually be required by you. So settings. So. Oh. Oh, this is actually a settings thing. Oops. Oh, actually, yes. These are preferred servers under normal circumstances. So Tiltify, no API test. That is in fact a reasonable default. I did do stuff to this. Oh, and what are my instant sandbox settings on? Spectate, start, good. I've been known to put this in the start page for streamlining stuff. Still loading. Oh. Yeah, it kind of relies on that. I suppose I should actually list it as a dependency. Oh, but it might, is it even available here? Yeah. which still has to be updated.
Choose start point.
Okay, yes, we expect that much data from this. Settings. V3 local. I could probably just change the settings and reload it, really.
Select starting location.
Okay. All right, so V3 Live, and this is where I have to use this little temporary streaming key. Oop, missed a character. Oh. Okay. It actually got that. Ooh. Oh, I'm not, I didn't, okay. Yep. Live. URL equals root plus donations. Well, at least that request was being made to CoUI instead of... What? Oh, that's right. I have to do this every time. Oh, and that was last year's thing, so we got a whole bunch of data. Fabulous. Not actually all data, but that's fine. Because we're not doing nothing to rewind to the beginning and then move forward. That would actually be a move backward. And let's just check. Yep, there's an after, so perfect. So let's get you set back to what would be our normal setup. So everything's looking good there so far. So we do sort of keep a track of this. Rename some of Tiltify V2 API, add Tiltify V3 API, and mod info, not that it really matters. We are at 10:31. And current game version, I've forgotten. Well, that was PTE, but it should be the same. Except for taking a lot longer to start up. Oh. Okay, we don't actually have our main page yet. Model.build version. I tried to put parentheses in there. One one 2214. I don't have a console for you yet. Oh, you know what I should do? I should make sure I didn't have any upstream updates. Okay, good. Actually, some of these are in fact adds and removals. Get rm minus r ui mods donation data Tiltify. Get add ui mods donation data Tiltify v2 v3. Went through modified URLs and things, updated our feed list. Switch Tiltify from API v2 to v3. Oh, that's right. WebSockets was the thing I did to do incremental updates. That's why that feed was in there. I knew I'd done something. Alright, so that is everything I wanted to do with v3. We just update the donation feed. We have it in both places. I will need to actually update the server with that, and at some point we're going to have to switch the server over to live data, but that'll probably be more when we get the menu nailed down kind of thing. That's actually, I need to start asking people about that as well. So that is it. It is lunchtime for me. Thanks for watching. Thanks to Left for the Cry, Ruffalo's, Assert Gaming, Nedmix Games, Start to Be Phased, Catnox, Inspeed Live, Crow Kitsune, Thylos, Dog and Lake, One Jellybean, Joy Chef for AP. I think I got everybody for it moved. For hosting me. What do we got going on right now? I probably need to be scouting for more programmers again. We do have 03F001. He regularly does a programming tutor stream, so if you've got any questions, it's a good place to ask. He might be a little bit quiet and when there's no questions. and he's working on his own project. But yeah, if there's someplace cool to hang out, that's someplace cool to hang out. Thanks for hanging out with me, and until next time.
It very much depends on the domain. So for your calculator, if you look, I don't even know, the thing's got to compute the numbers, right? Some range of numbers. You have to give me the requirements. Is it arbitrary precision? How much is it, right? You're going to have something that can compute these numbers. There's really not much controller to it. And then you have to show it. You have to display the numbers either through a console or a UI or something like that. I don't get how this is not a particularly I think it would be interesting to see how you manage to couple that stuff all together. Like how do you end up turning that into a big old ball of mess? Yes, you have combo boxes that make decisions about how to exactly calculate it, and the advanced calculations, the simple calculations take in a few doubles from text boxes. Oh, so the thing's coupled to a UI. So that's a question of, whether or not that's good or bad just depends on, it just means that you have a UI that I can't take the thing that controls my calculation engine. I can't take it to another project, right? For instance, you might be coupled to Windows. Does that make sense? That's a good one to explain. So if you're coupled to Windows, it means that you can't run on anything but Windows. Whether or not that's good or bad depends on kind of like your business needs, right? It's always the question, usually what comes up was, how much work did you have to put in to make it portable? Right? So the question's going to come up for you is, how much work did you have to put in to decouple it from your UI versus the benefit, right? If you can forecast and say, I will never use this outside of this UI framework, like ever, I would say, well, fuck, couple them, I guess. I don't know if that's what's easy. Do what's easy. Does that make sense? I would say from a business perspective, businesses have learned that you do not want to couple things together. Depending on the cost, right? Usually it does not cost that much. The stories is very often more involved. Let's see. Without just having experience, businesses often have this problem of changing requirements, right? You have a customer, they say, hey, I wanted to build a calculator, right? Then tomorrow they're like, yeah, well, we're running on Mac now. You're like, what? What do you mean you're running on Mac? Yeah, was that a problem? Why can't you just run it there? Things like this happen, right? Or they say, yeah, it's supposed to print it like this now, or it's supposed to do that now, right? This don't laugh. That happens. That really happens. Customers, they're not programmers. They hire you to do this stuff, and they're not always. It's not clear to them which things are difficult to do and which things are not. Like if they're like, look, everybody else runs on Mac. I don't get what the problem is. Can't you just run it over there now? Like, they're both computers. What's the problem? They do like the exact same thing. You can get into a lot of trouble and you can look very incompetent if you can't, when you get things like, fuck, the thing that controls the calculation engine is our UI. the software develop like so a lot of experienced software developers would say, "What the fuck's the UI got to do with that? What, you can't run it outside of that?" This is really to do with scale. If you're a business and you have a lot of money riding on this, the thing's gonna be that you're gonna protect the core thing, which is the thing that does the calculations, right? Your main business might be, we calculate big numbers, right? And we like to enter all kinds of markets, right? Which basically means there's different controllers and views all the time, right? But we have this core kind of calculation ability that doesn't, we have a test view thing that we hook up to it when we're testing it to make sure, right? But it might get used, we might get these answers and send them over to a web browser or something like that, right? But our main business is this chunk back here, right? We try to keep it decoupled from as much stuff as we can. I still don't know that I'm answering your question, or you're not. I'm somehow. I think You're not getting what I want or what you want. Does it make sense? I can't tell you that model view model is always good or always bad. I would say it's typically good. Like, it can bite you in the ass just as well as it can be helpful, right? If you're really small and you don't need to do all this decoupling stuff, right? You just need to get something done fast, right? And say to decouple it, you have to put in a lot of work or a lot of extra analysis and stuff like that. I mean, it's going to end up costing a lot of money, and it might be wasted effort because it doesn't go anywhere. You know what I mean? So to do it kind of like, quote, the right way would be silly or something, I guess. Or I guess wasted. So I think the point would be understand the problem. If you're doing it for practice, people, very often the way it works is that people couple stuff to the UI because that's just a natural, easy way to do it. People always do what's easiest. And they don't have the foresight they haven't been into a situation before where somebody asks something of their core capability. It's like, I need you to calculate some numbers for me. It's like, yeah, we got a calculator product that does all that. And they say, okay, but it runs over here now. And you say, fuck. You have to explain to them why this thing, look, it's going to take us some time to unravel. We have to disconnect this thing from this UI part. And you're going to feel very silly trying to explain that to a stakeholder. And it's going to make you seem incompetent is what it's going to seem strange. Like, why did it work like that? And you're like, well, it was cheap. It was easy to do it this way. Another thing is that when you separate things like this, it very often makes it easier to understand as a whole. I suppose it can go both ways. There's some overhead. Sometimes there's some overhead for decoupling things. So that can add a little bit of complexity. But I think as a whole, though, if you're trying to understand the thing as a whole, it simplifies it. There's some give and take. There's some trade-off. If I can teach you anything, is that it's trade-offs. There's never like model view controller, model view model. What the fuck is the difference between model view controller and model view model? What model view model is just a pass-through controller. Fuck's a view model? It sounds stupid. Is this some Microsoft shit? Okay, what? There's some details of who couples to what, when, where. Oh, maybe I totally misunderstood. Look, I just saw model view, view model, and thought MVC. Like, I thought you were just talking about high level architectural patterns. Here's the thing that I would tell you. It doesn't stop there. Just like the server, the back end and the front end, right? MVC exhibits in each of those recursively. In your backends, there are other things that have a model view and controller that make them up, right? It's just this pattern that is shows up, just exhibits in software. That's what I'm trying to get at. I think a better way. I think you still answered in some way. Well, I want to make sure. So when you would say, the question would be, I'm making a calculator. Is it worthwhile for me to decouple the business logic for my calculator from the UI? Or in some sense, it's kind of like saying, do you think the UI is really the part of the business logic for this calculator? I would say no. But there's a question though of who else do you need it decoupled? In general, I would say no. Because I'm kind of thinking from a selfish perspective, like, well, if I'm going to use your thing, I might not want to use your UI, right? But I want your calculator, right? It would be like some multi-precision library that tells you that you have to use a particular UI. You'd be like, what? I just need to add two numbers. Why do I have to give it input through a combo box? I think that should help spell out the difference, because nobody does that, right? Because very clearly one's built as a library and the other one was just built as like an application, right? If it's built as an application, it's not really meant to be reusable. A lot of these patterns though, they're thought up in the context of we really ought to prefer them as libraries, these pieces that we can just compose, because the requirements always change. This thing about trying to move fast with software, that's really what a lot of it stems from. So I would say in general, you make the decision, should it be coupled or not? It's just a question of how much resources do you have, right? I would say decouple it if you have the time. If it costs you like nothing, decouple it. Easy, right? Sometimes there's a question of, okay, it doesn't take much effort, but maybe I need. Sometimes you see some weird, crazy things show up because of performance reasons. So that's different. Hopefully you don't have to do things like that. But sometimes you gotta merge some things to make them kind of go faster, right? And you end up with some weird, some Frankenstein, something or another. You hear about them people trying to kind of put like memory and other pieces of the motherboard like merge back with the CPU. They're like, yeah, look, the bottleneck now is these buses. Should we take it back? Because that's how computers used to be built. They lumped it all together, right? Somebody's like, no. This thing's the thinking part. This thing's the remembering part. This one does something else. There can be advantages to having things coupled together in terms of like performance, right? But I'm just saying it depends. It's not. I don't know. There's like a right answer to this. All I would have to do is tell you a bunch of stories, and then you would say, "Oh, okay, I get it. It's complicated." This is where. So when people make the joke, anytime you're asked to do anything as a contractor, the answer is you say it depends. Someone comes up to you with a question. How long does this thing take? And it depends. You give me all the information. Like I can't. Could take forever. It could take a minute. I don't know. Oh, that's what I was thinking about. The UI is not the logic, right? So I was practicing model view model because I did another project where my UI was kind of the logic, and I run into some problems. this is a thing. If you want to understand, if you want to really learn from it, you need to share the logic between two projects or two products, two project. You just make projects. You don't think of them as products, do you? Do that, then come back to me. I think you're not gonna get it until you have to do that. You feel that pain. You're like, well, I'm not writing the calculator thing twice, right? What are we gonna do? Maintain it in two different places? Go fuck yourself. We're making it one thing, right? You got these problems like, well, this one wants to control it this way, and this one wants to control it the other way, and you have to somehow reconcile that. You're like, all right, we're gonna make. There's one way to control it. There's a controller thing here. We represent them the same way. Get this one controller, and really the only thing that's different between these is, are you clicking with the mouse? Are you typing it in through a keyboard? Typing it into a browser, right? It's like, well, those are essentially the same things. We get the input. We're getting the input no matter what, right? We just have to translate it into this little intermediate language that the controller understands. It doesn't understand either UI natively, right? There's a little translation that goes on. That's the overhead that you're worried about. Well, you don't pay that overhead if you don't have the two projects, right? That would be stupid. It's like, what? Why'd you do all this? Like, well, you ever heard of Yagni? This would be a Yagni thing. Well, I decoupled all this stuff. I'm like, well, why'd you decouple it? Maybe sometime in the future we got to do something. Yagni's a tough one because Yagni basically goes against the thing that I just told you about. Yagni's a tough one because it swings both ways, right? You want things to be decoupled and be reusable, but you don't want to spend time over engineering everything. I don't know what the answer to that is. Look very clearly. I over engineer things and I do Yagni a lot. I don't know if I'm really the right person to be speaking to not doing it. This is a thing that happens in the industry. People say, if you're Linus Torvalds, you say it's masturbation or whatever. These are things that they don't have any benefit. People just start making shit because they're like, look at this. These things go together. Isn't that cool? Right? But they can't answer the question of like, well, why did you need that? Why did I pay for that? It was another way of thinking of it, right? If you're a customer, like, why did I pay for that? The trick is to know your customer better than they do. So if you, it can pay dividends because the day that they come to you and they're like, yeah, look, we needed to do, how it does X, Y? We also needed to do Z. And you say, no problem. You go in, you instantiate some new thing, or you compose the thing that they just wanted, and you're like, all right, I'm done. And they're going to be like, wow, how the fuck do you do that so quick? Right? So they might be, so it's, it goes both ways. I don't have clear the answer to that, but just know that I think if you just know about it, just knowing that it's a thing, this is something that plagued a lot of engineers, by the way. You get bit by it and you like to over-engineer stuff. There's nothing wrong with having things that are over-engineered. Well, the things that are wrong with it is you can make things more what's the word? More over-engineered. It can cover more use cases, right? But it might come at the cost of the thing's harder to use, right? You're like, I got all these knobs and dials. There's like 50 knobs and dials. And you show up, and you're like, I thought there was just going to be like one button, dude. Why do you have all that? I have no idea what I'm supposed to put in for all these parameters. I just wanted to do something, this thing, right? So you have that. These things, there's ways to mitigate that. It's complicated. There's ways to mitigate that, though, as well. But just be aware. So, software is complicated. It's all complicated, and you'll never get it right. So yeah, you got that to look forward to. Yagni, what was the original? Went off on a tangent. Over-engineer the defaults too. I'm a big fan. If you if I have the simple interface, a lot of times what you see is like, I'm gonna give you a simple interface. a view, some might call it, right? But it's like, well, that's not fundamentally, there's a different model to this thing, right? It's like I've broken it down to these pieces and I just compose it this way and then I give you that feature that you wanted, right? It's the idea. Really, it comes down, look, composition. Make everything, take one from the reality playbook. Everything's made up of atoms in this world, right? You can compose a lot of different things with simple atoms, right? Use that trick. It's a pretty good trick. Like, wow, it's way better to just like make pieces that you glue, that you can like just compose. Makes it a lot easier to do stuff. There you go. That's your, that's now, I don't know if you can get away with that if you say MVC is just composition. Look, some of these things are very general. MVC probably speaks to something a little more specific than just composition. But a lot of these words, I always had trouble. In software engineering knowing what the different patterns were. Like, for instance, you have patterns like there's the template pattern, the observer pattern, and the strategy pattern. And you're like, okay, these are different. How are they different? All right, strategy, okay. The observer, there might be lots of observers. All right. With strategy and template, maybe there's probably only just one. Okay, so maybe we think of it that way. Okay, there's some kind of dispatch call going on. What is the difference between them? It's like, all right, with the template, there's some context that already exists, I guess, before it goes and does it. And the strategy is, just a virtual call? Here's this problem. Everything seems the same. That's why we always had a joke. It's the virtual call pattern. It is it's a nuanced thing. This is actually very common to do things like this. And in fact, this is why you see, if you do C++, you're like, okay, I just wanted a string, right? But how come in the compiler messages, it tells me basic string, T, character traits, allocator? What is all this shit? I just wanted a string, dude. I didn't know what I was signing up for. This is bullshit. It's kind of, that's the thing I was getting at. You can smooth, so a string is a particular composition of more primitive things in the eyes of the standard library. But when they come to you and give you a string, right, they're not going to start talking about basic strings and all the pieces. Like, okay, you just want the default string. Yeah, all right, type def. Here's a string. Yeah, that's the string everyone's talking about. Whether it's made up of, ultimately made up of things that comprise it, we won't talk to you about that. You just think of it as string. However, you should know that sometimes these things are a little more flexible. There can be benefits to having, well, this is a bad example because C++ strings are pretty much terrible. But if they weren't terrible, for instance, at least you can change out the allocator, right? Someday somebody comes to you and says, okay, we need to allocate the strings a particular way now. By default, they all went through mallocator, which is usually good. But today we have a special case. It has to go through a different allocator or something like that. Can you do it? With those algorithms, they're built so that the allocator is separate. It's a parameter to the type. You can say, yeah, okay, use this allocator instead. And it's just a different type and you're done. So the value of that, so here's the issue. That has value. I just showed you, it's got value, right? But only if you invoke it. If you only ever use malloc strings, if you only ever use strings, the basic string thing it ends up being wasted effort. That's the Yagni thing, right? So the trick is, all right, can you figure out whether you're going to need this or not? And that sort of just comes with experience, and it comes with just understanding your business or understanding your customer. Or I guess that's the same thing. I don't have an answer for that. There's no general answer for that. You just have to have a good crystal ball, I guess. I would say do the over engineering if it's cheap, right? It's a trade-off. Like, well, if it didn't cost you very much, well, why not? Just do it, right? If it's something that costs you a lot, it's like, okay, maybe we do the cheap thing for now. Do it in a way so that if we have to come back and redo it, we don't have to redo that much stuff, right? It's like, well, we know it always has this interface, but there might be more details to it later. It's like, well, let's just do this cheapo one for now.